start with you. What came first, the book or meeting Priscilla, and at what point and what particular aspect of the story made you see it as a Sofia Coppola movie?
Yeah, I was just reading her book sort of for fun, and I was really struck by how relatable it was and how vivid the details of her life. And I had no idea what she went through, and she's such part of such a famous couple, but we know so little about her. So I was really just struck with her story and how she told it. And I got in touch with her and said, "Would you ever be open to a film?" And she said, "Let me think about it," and then got back to me and said she would, be open to me adapting it. So it was really, really interesting to be able to talk to her and ask her questions. But I was really struck by her story and what she went through and how to turn that into a movie and express it visually.
Right. Cailee, first of all, congratulations on the Coppa Volpi for Best Actress at the Venice Film Festival. Really incredible company there, going back to the 30s with Betty Davis and Helen Hayes.
I have no
and
idea.
Hepburn.
I made sure I didn't Google it because I knew I was getting I should do it now.
It is amazing. The
So
list
crazy.
of women that have won that in the 77 decades is incredible. More than 7 decades, actually. Yeah. Even up to recently, Kate Blanchett and Penelope Cruz and Isabelle Huppert, it's just, a really stunning lineup.
Whoa, I'm hearing this for the first time.
So, this I'm guessing was your first big festival experience with a premiere?
Yes, it was. I mean, Venice is something else. It's like what you sort of imagine as a kid when you think of what Hollywood should be, when you walk out into a carpet like that, and to bring this film with Sofia, a director who I've looked up to since I was a teenage girl, and to have Priscilla there in support of the film. It was the first time I had watched the film was when we brought it to Venice, which was such an interesting experience because I was seated right next to Priscilla Presley herself watching the movie, and so talk about surreal. Yeah, well, first, watching yourself on screen is never an enjoyable experience. It's just weird, but then seeing it with an audience at that festival, and on top of it, having the person that you're playing sitting right next to you, wondering what she's thinking. It was completely nerve-wracking, but then
I was sitting next to her, and she was like
at some point, Sophia's like, "Do you want to go?" But then, the response after the movie finished, and then getting to hear from Priscilla herself how she felt about the movie. She was visibly moved, and it was that was really memory of a lifetime.
Right.
That moment.
You're in your 20s. I mean, the Elvis myth was well and truly entrenched in American pop culture way before you were born. What did you know about Elvis when this project came to you, and specifically, what did you know about Priscilla, if anything?
Well, I was born in Tennessee and raised in southern Missouri, so Elvis and Priscilla are sort of American royalty. But in the South particularly, they hold a different weight. And I grew up going to Graceland on family vacations, and we'd do road trips over there. And my mom was a massive Elvis fan and had like a shrine of him in her house. So
her on as a consultant.
she knew that she actually knew the book very well. But I have vivid memories of walking around Graceland and hearing "If I Can Dream" on the speakers, and looking up and seeing my dad starting to cry, and really sort of putting the pieces together of what Elvis meant to people in America and of that generation. So I obviously knew so much about him, and I knew that Priscilla went with Elvis, but I think that was the thing that was so exciting diving into this project, is because I didn't know anything about her, and what her story was.
She's always almost invisible in the stories. She's like a hairdo and a goodbye, and that's it.
And she's got such a fascinating story and such a, inspiring journey that she went on. So that was an exciting thing to really look into and try to crack open.
Mm. Sophia, tell us a little about the casting process. It must have been really challenging to find someone who could play convincingly from age 14 to 28. How did Cailee come to your attention?
Yeah, that was the big challenge, is one actress to do all those ages and to be convincing as a teenager. And so my casting team said, you should really meet Cailee, who's an actress that they, was an up-and-coming actress they thought was talented. And we just met, and I thought, oh, she really looks like a kid. I could believe that she could, play the younger Priscilla. And I knew because she's in her 20s that and she's, it's hard to talk in front of you. Like, she's thoughtful, and we talked about it, and I felt like there's just part of the casting process is just kind of clicking and being on the same page, and I realized she was, thoughtful, and I saw a little bit of her work, but not much. So, but I just felt, and then you meet more people, and I always thought, just that Cailee felt like she could do the part, and then also she had just worked with Kirsten Dunst, who I'm close with, who said how much she loved working with Cailee, and that helped me have the confidence.
That must have been on the Alex Garland film, Civil War?
Yeah.
Really looking forward to that one.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Jacob Elordi, how did you come upon this 700 feet tall Australian to play Elvis?
I know, I thought, how nobody looks like Elvis. How am I ever going to cast Elvis? Because when I was writing the script, I was just picturing the real Priscilla and Elvis, and then I thought, oh, now I have to figure out how to make this into a film and find humans that can play them. So that was challenging, and a friend of mine said, oh, you should check out Jacob Elordi, and I met him, and I thought, he really had the qualities that I imagined Elvis had. He's so charismatic, he's really charming, he's lovable, he could be irresistible, which you needed to go through the lows. The story has a roller coaster of highs and lows, and you had to understand why she stayed with him with some of his behavior, so he had to be irresistible, as I imagine Elvis must have been in the way that Priscilla described him. So he just had those qualities, and also a thoughtfulness that, I wanted to show his vulnerable side. And when she talked about first meeting him, how vulnerable he was, and I knew Jacob had the sensitivity to show that side of him that I feel we haven't seen.
Mm. So one of the things I love about your films is that they allow us to observe your protagonist, usually a young, somewhat solitary woman, or somewhat lonely woman, in some kind of cage, some kind of trap. But they allow us to observe from outside, but also to get inside the head. So we're seeing the story from their point of view at the same time we're observing it externally. How did the two of you talk about that and come to that in the film? Because, there's an incredible amount going on behind your eyes in the film. An incredible amount of that performance is internalized, where you're, going through all kinds of processes. I mean, how did you get to that?
Yeah, for me, the story was so important to be in her shoes, in her point of view. So we were always talking about being in her point of view, and her book is, written that way. So it's just for me to try to be not judgmental about what the situation was, and just learn her experience and have the audience experience it through her. And so much of the part you had to kind of feel the character and express that without dialogue, which I think is so challenging. And I think it's a tribute to you, a talent that she's able to express so much with just in her face. I don't know how you do that.
Thank you. To get to have Priscilla herself and us having our separate conversations of her throughout prep, and then coming back together and asking ourselves those big questions of what was she thinking during this time, and this must have been so hard. How did she get through these moments? But
you can imagine what you would feel like in that situation,
right?
And just put yourself in it.
Yeah, the story is quite universal, and what women went through and still go through now. But I think the thing that we always went back to was those conversations with the book, obviously, but also getting to have the person themselves to talk to and to sort of bounce off of.
Yeah, but I remember there was a scene where he breaks up with Priscilla when she's 9 months pregnant, and you're walking down the hall, and in the book she talks about coming to some resolution, like how hard it was, and then she like knew that he was being a baby, and she said they never spoke about it again. At one point, I tried to have narration because the way she described it said everything, but we decided not to do that. And then I remember talking to you about that, and Cailee was like, "Oh yeah," and then there's a click, and something changes as she's walking down the hall, and I remember you're like, "Let me do it one more time," and she did something, and like where she comes into her own and resolve, and I was like, it was so. You really see it in the take, and I just yeah. So that's her being able to express that. But I was always impressed also that she was never a victim, Priscilla, or the way Cailee portrayed it, because what she went through, that could so easily, she could be a doormat, and I was so struck by Priscilla's strength, and she's so delicate and feminine, but then has this real inner strength, and the fact that she was able to leave, I think that's what impressed me the most about her story.
I think, yeah, I was just going to say there's so many prisms this story could be looked at through, and in many of them, she is the victim. You know, he is, in today's language, he would be considered as grooming her. You know, he's sexually dysfunctional, he's a mama's boy, he compartmentalizes women into the sexy co-star or the Madonna figure. But, you know, the film is very fair to him, I think. I don't think it villainizes him. I think it does show his vulnerability. But it also shows that she is very self-possessed, even from a young age. I love the fact that the performance, you know, she makes it clear to her parents, either you let me do what I want, I'm going to find a way to do it anyway. So did you talk about that, the importance of this character having agency, of not being someone just manipulated?
I think that was really clear in Priscilla's story, that she was always, it's the first story that I've done like that, because people compared it to Marie Antoinette, and I thought it was so different. I mean, there's similarities, but she was just like put in a situation and had to deal with it. And this one, like, Priscilla's driving the story, like she gets herself there and she makes it happen, and there's always, and then she leaves. And so I felt like she has this sense of agency, which I think you capture just by knowing her from the story and speaking to her.
Yeah, even as a young girl, when they first met, she always said that she wasn't sort of, you know, running up to him or acting, you know, she wasn't she wasn't fangirling. Yeah, she had something from the life that she, you know, she was in. Her dad was in the Air Force. She had a sort of,
it's a sense of herself.
Yeah, she, you know, her upbringing made her who she was, and they met at that particular time. But yeah, all those things came from Priscilla herself in the way that she described those moments in that time.
And even like in the Las Vegas scene, she made it really clear that they weren't giving her pills, they weren't offering her pills. She like asked for them, like she saw them doing it, and she's like, "Oh, can I try that?" Which I understand as a teenager, like you want to try things, and the older cool kids are doing that. So she was always, driving her story, I think.
Were there any particular aspects of Priscilla's story that resonated for either of you, personally?
I mean, I think just the universal part of like growing up and like your first kiss, and then, but then it was in these extraordinary situations. But she talks about like being in a man's bedroom for the first time and how intimidating it was, and with the set we made the bed like extra tall and large to make more, you know. So I think just that kind of the human aspect I could relate to, and then her talking about becoming a mother, and the guys are all going off to have fun and work, and she's supposed to stay home with the baby. Like I can relate to that, even though I'm a working person. Like there's still an expectation that you're supposed to be like fulfilled and stay home now while the guys go off and have fun and do things. So I think there's like the universal aspects. And the army brat I can relate to. I always went on location with my parents, so I was always a new kid at school, so I can relate to that.
Yeah, I mean, falling in love for the first time and what that feels like, it's the most amazing feeling. You'll give anything up and do anything to hold on to that, and you sort of don't realize along the way how much you are giving up, and then you look around, pick up the pieces, and figure out who you are, and try to come out on the other side of that. So, yeah, like Sophia said, it's the backdrop is such a heightened world. We're in Graceland, but I think the moments that at those milestones that she goes through are all really relatable.
Yeah, it's so easy to, as a young person, to get lost in someone else's identity. I think I could relate to that, and that you had so much about her finding her own identity. And she told me that at the end, when she left, that she said she didn't know, her taste was Elvis's taste. She didn't know what her taste was, and so I thought it was so great that she was able as a young woman to, find herself outside of him.
I mean, in that aspect, it's so many different types of films. It's a coming of age film, it's a first love film, it's a film about isolation and emancipation, it's a film about the intoxication of fame. I mean, it's also a dreamy mood piece that just takes you into this world, and a world that she slowly awakens from and realizes she has to kind of save herself. How do you how do you sum up the film if you have to do it in a
That sounds good. I really appreciate it. That's so cool. It's so cool because those are all